So I've started recording. I tested this yesterday, and my machine crashes pretty consistently within 20 to 30 minutes. So the good news is that the lockup or responsiveness of my machine has no impact on the recording. So if I disappear and come back, everything's fine. So I'll start. I'm John Bernard. I work for Red Hat. I've been working on the Cinder project for quite a while. I will be your appointed PTL for this cycle. Rajat was the previous PTL. I'm now fully understanding the amount of responsibility that he carried, and I would like to once again express my gratitude for all of that work and effort. Thank you, Rajat. It's an honor to be part of the project in this capacity, and yeah, whoever wants to go next. I don't know if you guys see the same order that I do in the like in my display, but like, yeah, we should be able to just walk through. I'll let you guys.
Yeah, my suggestion is to go down the list that's in the Etherpad, but in where people had signed in.
That is a great suggestion. Thanks, Alan. Okay, Takashi, are you here?
I think I'm next. Yeah, I think that some of you may know me, but I'm Takashi. I'm currently working in entity data and involved in a kind of confidential computing project. But I used to be, that I used to be in Red Hat and has been involved in OpenStack for a while. Although my own personal focus is not really Cinder only, but I've been involved in several deployment tool projects like Puppet, OpenStack, or even Triple, which was retired recently. So I'd like to bring some of the topics I can propose from the deployment tools perspective. That's all. So I think Stephen is not here, right?
So Pete.
Yeah.
All right. So my name is Pete Zaitsev, and I work for Red Hat in OpenStack, and I've just became a core for Cinder a couple of weeks ago, and I mostly focus on backup for now, but I'm just looking generally at the project overall. I just lack the experience to do like sweeping changes and stuff like that. But I'm learning. And for my Etherpad, next one is Christian, but he said that he's not here. So Eric then.
Hey, Eric Harney. I'm at Red Hat working on OpenStack stuff, primarily Cinder, for a while now. Looking forward to another good PTG. Brian, you on here?
Yeah, hi, I'm Brian Rossmeda. I work for Red Hat, work mostly on Cinder, also do some work on Glance, Cinder Core. I guess that's about it. Yeah, I hope we have a good, productive PTG.
Looks like I'm next. I'm Alan Bishop, another Red Hatter. I am a member of the Cinder team within the Red Hat OpenStack group. And though I have contributed to Cinder itself sporadically over the last several cycles, most of the time I work on the deployment tooling side of things. So that's why it's been a little while since I've actually contributed to Cinder, but I have in the past, and I hope to do so again in the future. That's it for me. Rajat?
Don't you also have a deep understanding of drivers and all the weird stuff that vendor drivers do? And I always thought that was your area. Like
well, yeah, sort of. I'm actually not, an expert in the driver code itself, but I do work very closely with a lot of the driver vendors and helping get them integrated in with Red Hat's version of OpenStack.
So hi, I'm Rajat. I am a Cinder core and I'm based out of India. I was previously serving as PTL and now John will be the new PTL. So I'm glad I have very less responsibilities and John is taking over. So thanks, John, for that. And next is Josephine, I think.
Hi, my name is Josefina. I've worked for SegoStack and now I'm working for Cloud and Teat. And I'm currently participating in a German project called SCS, which has OpenStack as base, and so I'm hopping between projects as usual. I was already before that, so I have an overview over a lot of core projects in OpenStack. Next is Gorka.
Thanks. So I'm Gorka Ileor. I'm from Madrid, Spain. I work for Red Hat as well. And I used to do a lot of Cinder and OS Break. Nowadays, I'm working in more of a installer, in the installer side of things for Red Hat. So I haven't done much lately. We'll see if I get to come back soonish. I think that's it. I don't know if next Florent is present. Yes, I think he is.
We can't hear you.
Yep, we cannot hear, though it looks like the... Yeah, you are unmuted, but we cannot hear you. Yep. Maybe we can skip while Florent fights with the system.
Yeah.
Well, we just heard you say yeah. So
yeah, you can hear me now.
Yeah. Yes.
Wow. I got 2 or 3 mics in my setup, and I don't know which one is the one that I'm using. Anyways, I was just telling you guys that it's nice to meet you all here. I've been working with OVH Cloud now for 2 years almost. Right now, I'm responsible for the storage squad. So dealing on a daily basis with Cinder and also with Glance, but for me with a specific focus on Cinder. I will let my other colleagues, Marek and Axel, just introducing themselves, but just to tell you this message, it's not just by chance that we are right now with you guys. We are now in some kind of momentum at OVH Cloud towards upstream, because we've been massively and at scale using OpenStack now for years and years. We got a massive amount of machines that are using OpenStack, and with a lot of compute, I mean, for our customers. And we'd like to be closer to upstream, definitely, and to you, and especially you, Red Hat, of course, just to make sure it's not too much of a pain when it goes to another version, when we want to go from one release to another, or to 5 others, actually. So that's something we are trying to create now, and that's why we're here, and would like to be of some more presence and influence in the group, definitely, just to be as transparent as I can. So that's it. Maybe I let Axel now in the order of the list to introduce himself.
Yeah, sure. Axel Mozagi. So as Florent said, I'm working for OVH Cloud on the storage squad as well. More on the backup problematics we have for now. Maybe maybe I would do something else later, but still on storage. I don't know. Some of you may know my name because I'm also PTL of Mistral, and I think that's it. You can go, Marek.
Okay. Hey, so I'm Marek Chmiel, working for OVH Cloud as well in the same squad. I joined the squad recently. I'm preparing a feature for Cinder backup that would allow to migrate backends transparently. It's not presented yet upstream, but I think it might be interesting soon for you. So when I have something working and presentable, I will get back with it. For now, I joined to get to know you and to spend some good time. Okay, and next person on the list, Luis.
Hey, I'm Luis. I work at CERN, running the OpenStack cloud here. I'm connecting today to catch up with the developments of Cinder, and in particular, what we have in the radar these days for Cinder will be the developments around backups. So anything around that of much interest for me. Thank you. But next one is Desiree.
Desiree, seems that you are the next one with no sound.
Oh, hi everyone. I'm Desire, and I'm an individual contributor. Although I did intern with Outreach here on OpenStack. That was last year, March. So basically this cycle, I'm looking to work on the SDK project, finished up after Rajat. So yeah, that's it about me.
Yoshi, do you want to introduce yourself? I think you're the last to join.
Yeah, hi. I came up late. Didn't know what you're talking about till now. So yeah, I'm Yossi. I'm from Israel. Cinder QE. Yeah, that's it. I guess.
Excellent. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for coming. We'll try to move through these topics in order on the Etherpad. We have probably more time slots booked than we'll need, so it's not we won't necessarily use the entire block every single day. So I think in general the approach will be to try to get as much done as we can, and up until the point where there's a consensus on needing a break, and then we'll just break and keep rolling on the next day. If there's any input or requirements related to that, or you have a specific topic on a specific day or in a specific time or something like this that isn't already communicated, let me know, and I think we'll get started. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a concern. I think it was Marek that was mentioning that he's working on a feature for Cinder Backup to do some kind of migration. And I was hoping he is not putting a lot of time into it before bringing the general approach to Cinder, because it has happened in the past that people dedicate a lot of effort in an approach before discussing it, and then they realize that the approach they've spent so much time is not well received, and they have to kind of start from the beginning, and they get a lot of motivation, like get a bit burnout, but that fact that starting over. So I don't know if later on one in the PTG, you may want, even if you don't have code working, to give the general idea, so we can confirm that it's like there is nobody saying, no, that's terrible, or, oh, we tried that and it was not a good idea, whatever.
Okay, very good point. Thanks for this. So I'll update the Etherpad and I'll put my topic somewhere in the end.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. I need to manipulate the infra-bot really quickly. I think we're good to go. Rajat, does this all look kosher? I'm still kind of just winging this here and not entirely sure if I'm catching all of the things I'm supposed to be catching.
Yeah, I think we are going good. I was just concerned about the notes, meeting notes. So I used to write all the discussion points. Like right now we are just in the discussion, but maybe if you are able to, or maybe I can do the writing of the notes part. That
That's
makes
great.
it easier later to summarize the discussions.
Yeah, if you're willing to do that, that would be incredibly helpful. If not, or in part, I can try to fill in as well. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I have no issues. I can do that.
Cool, thank you.
And for people who want to be new contributors to Cinder, I just put a link on the Etherpad to our contributing documentation. Just take a quick look through that. It gives you an outline of how we work, the weekly meetings, IRC, specs, reviews. Just gives you a good idea of what the process is, so you can hook into it. It's on line 62.
Okay, when we're ready, we can get started with the first topic then. This is improving driver documentation. There's no name on who's going to drive this, so I'm not entirely sure. Does anyone?
I added it. Sorry, I forgot to put my username there.
Oh, you have the
Yeah,
floor.
Okay, so basically regarding this topic, so this was initially discussed during the ZPTG. So we realized like when the new vendor drivers are being proposed, sometimes they don't understand the whole interface of the driver methods and what they have to exactly implement and return, and all the details regarding a method that they need to inherit from the driver interface class. So to make their work easier, like for the driver vendors, like we decided to improve the driver documentation, like the doc strings that we have. So it auto generates some documents, and it might become easier for them to at least understand like what inputs this method receives, like what should be the return type, what should be the objective of this method, like what it should perform. So we started that effort, and yeah, I think Gorka had a patch that improves the setup part of it, but we realized that it was a big patch and it touches every driver. It requires every driver to report on that CI, and that was the first patch of the base chain. And it was hard getting it merged, and because of that also like the other documentation patches were dependent on it. So Gorka said like we can skip that first patch and then just focus on the driver documentation. So if you take a look at that topic that I've added on line 71, it has three patches for three different methods. Like it's just a start point. Like for the driver documentation. So yeah, basically I just wanted to repropose this so we can at least get back to this effort again. It's been like 1 year and there has been no activity on it. So
So what would be your proposal on how to move forward with improving the docs?
So in this documentation part, basically it's increasing the verbosity of methods. So all the methods usually have their doc strings, but they are not, they don't explain the method purpose in depth. Even the parameters that are accepted are very, I mean, it just mentioned it's the volume object and nothing apart from that. So that kind of thing. So make it more verbose. And there is a defined pattern that I've used, like I need to take reference. I forgot what exactly the approach was. So yeah, so initially I just mentioned the operation when this particular method is being called. Is it mandatory for the drivers to implement it, override it, or not? Because there are some methods that, like for retype, for example, retype doesn't need to be overridden by all the drivers, but in case of create snapshot, it should be overridden. So if they want to implement, they can implement or not. So if it is mandatory or not. And yeah, just a few more points explaining the purpose of the driver, and then yeah, so this is like the docstring pattern. And for the patches, it's not like I plan to work on all the doc strings, like anyone is free to work on it. Just add it to the relation chain, so it's better. We can even discuss and assign different methods to different people if more people are willing to work on it. Else I can just continue the effort of just improving docstring for every driver.
I feel like, given the history here, if we don't kind of create some kind of document or something with things that need to be documented, and then people get assigned to it voluntarily, or if you're a core, maybe it's kind of forced upon you to at least do one, that sort of thing. I think this is, we'll never finish this. And I think it is very important to make life easier for vendors to be able to know what is expected there. So maybe we should try to be a bit more forceful in the proposal. I'm mostly speaking for myself as well. If my name is not on something, I will probably forget about it again. So
yeah, that does sound like a good plan. Maybe I can create an Etherpad and just mention all the driver methods that require more work, and then we can get back to it and start assigning people, or maybe people can volunteer themselves to do certain methods. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, either that or we could like just do it now. Like if somebody creates an Etherpad, we can open up the driver interface and just start parceling out things to work on. I think you may have said this, Rajat. So one problem we've got is that when the drivers are actually written, the classes they inherit from are not the interface class. So we sort of have this kind of duplication. So part of what we're doing is trying to move so some of the methods that might not be documented well in the interface class might be documented well on the actual driver classes. So what we want to do is move the documentation to the interface class so it's obvious where it is. And Rajat's I was just looking at his copy volume to image patch. Let me give you a link. Sorry. So if you take a look at this, there's a way you can do the references in the doc string, so that when the documents get generated, it'll give you a link over to the interface class. So I don't know if that's clear to everybody, but the place where we want to put the stuff is in the interface classes. Those are there because we have tests that can make sure that the drivers are implementing those methods. So we want to put the documentation for the methods there. And since we have it in two places, it's gotten out of sync. So what we want to do is put a reference to we want the stuff to be in the interface class, but we want to put links so that you go over, you know where to look when you're looking at the driver classes. But I agree with Gorka, if we don't like assign this, it's not going to happen. But since this is Tuesday, if we could do some stuff.
Maybe we can, so that this meeting is not that long in this specific topic, we can maybe say, okay, either Rajat or me or as both, do the Etherpad.
Okay.
Right, what is needed, maybe create groups of methods that are very similar or related. And then on our tomorrow or the next day, we come back and then do the follow-up assigning things.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah, and I found out we already have an Etherpad. I mean, the name says yoga, but yeah, it does contain a bunch of methods. Like for some, we have already done the work, but if you go to line 124, it has create snapshot, create volume, detach. So there are some things some notes that have been left there. So maybe we can continue from there or just carry over the whole content to a new generic Etherpad, as it says yoga driver APIs.
Do you have the, oh, you put it in the chat. Yes, sorry. I will put it in the Etherpad instead of the chat. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I should have.
Okay, yeah, no problem. My bad. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just one more thing. So last time we kind of got stalled because we're realizing some of these methods weren't well defined and things were getting it was kind of ugly. But we don't want to make any code changes on this because those really hold things up. So we want this effort to be just documentation. So feel free to put a fix me or a to do if you see something that's bad or crazy or stupid. But we're not going to let that stop us from trying to finish this week if we can.
Yeah, it makes sense to just say, even when we are documenting things, this looks weird, we know it, but this is what it does. And yeah, because precisely the first patch was about that, is we have two methods that you could implement, half in one, half in the other, everything in one, everything in the other made not sense. But yeah, we should not get fixated on how weird the interface is and just do the documentation, Yep.
If we're trying to make some progress on this within the next days, do we want to revisit this before the end of the PTG?
Yes.
Maybe we can start tomorrow by following up on the previous day items. Like tomorrow, the first topic can be this one, just follow up and continue with the PTG.
Okay.
I guess the only other question I've got is, so these are touching .py files, but they're really documentation changes. So our policy for documentation changes is that they only require 1+2 to get merged, whereas usually you require 2. +2s. Do we want to extend the documentation policy to this?
Yes.
Okay.
Because,
All right.
even if the documentation is not great and it requires additional reviews and improvement or needs, that anything is better than nothing. Let's put it that way. So I'm okay with just one reviewer.
Okay.
If
Just
the
want to make sure.
reviewer doesn't feel confident with what that person is reviewing, may decide to say, oh, I'm not an expert here, it looks good, but I will let somebody else. But to be optional, the 2 reviewer for this. Yeah.
And it won't cause any regression, so it's a safe patch.
Yeah, worst case that happens is that we break our documentation for a couple of days. It's not the end of the world.
Well, the documentation gate does hold up everything. So, but
yeah, but by break I mean that it's unreadable. It renders, but it's like everything is wrong. Yeah, no big deal.
Okay, so maybe we can add an action item to just extend the old Etherpad and add new methods, and then we can start assigning people tomorrow.
We can look at it tomorrow morning if you're okay with you, Rajat. My morning, not yours. And we can get it ready for the PTE.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good to me. Yeah, thanks. That was all from my side on this topic.
Okay. I think we've adequately captured that. We'll revisit that one at the start of the session tomorrow. Next on the agenda is user visible information for volume types. I believe, Josephine, this is your topic.
Yep. I already pitched that in one of the Cinder meetings a few weeks ago. So I have a use case where I want to have certain information visible in volume types. That is, for me, whether a volume type leads to an encrypted volume or not, and whether it leads to replication in the backend or not. And it is not yet visible for users when for normal users, for non-admin users. And there are a few ways how to achieve visibility for that. I've outlined a few possible ways in the Cinder spec I wrote. Yeah, and I would like to discuss this, and I need a decision here in which direction this should be going. Because I think I might only have those 2 use cases, but other people might have other use cases where they still need user visible information from volume types. So the first way would be if you're looking at the API and you get the volume type object, everything will stay the same. You get the properties, there are key value pairs, and those properties are used as extra specs in the volume scheduler, and that's where the problem occurs. You cannot use the properties field as is. There would be option 1A to just have a whitelist, blacklist in the volume scheduler, so the extra specs can also be populated with other properties. That's a little bit hacky. So option 1B would be to have an extra table in the database, volume type metadata, for example, which is then joined in the API. So you only have one property list, and you have to have a whitelist, blacklist in the API to decide whether this is an extra spec that should be evaluated by the volume scheduler, or this is just metadata, just information that is visible for the user, so it just can go into the metadata table. And yeah, that would be the least invading option and something I would prefer. And yeah, that does only the first two options. I have outlined other options there too, but yeah, Alan?
I'm scrambling to find a link to paste here, but I worked on a feature several cycles ago called user visible extra specs. And there are currently 3 specs that are considered user visible. One of them is whether replication is enabled, but I'm trying to figure out whether the work that had been done before aligns at all with what you're describing, Josephine, because it sounds like it does.
It partly aligns, but only partly, and that's the problem. Because for replication, replication can on the one side come from OpenStack, the volume type requires some replication, or replication can be achieved, for example, if you're using Ceph and have internal replication inside Ceph, that will never get its way to Cinder. Cinder doesn't know it. So that's that kind of information I also want to see, but that's nothing that can and should be evaluated in the volume scheduler.
The problem, Alan, is that your stuff are actual real extra specs that were made visible, but they affect the scheduler. And these things, we don't want to really affect the scheduler, but we want them to be available to end users to see. So that's why there's this, I'm kind of leery about the blacklist, whitelist thing. So the problem is we can create some kind of volume type metadata separate from extra specs. So then we have the separation, they're not going to affect anything and mess up the scheduler. But then it's going to put some extra work on the operator, because some of the stuff that you would encode in extra specs, you'd also have to expose in this metadata. But I'm kind of leaning toward doing it that way and just say, if you really want to expose stuff to your users, then you're going to have to do it in 2 places. Or we could start out with it in 2 places, and then if it gets super popular and there's demand for making it easier to use, then we could do that. The other thing I was thinking, Josephine, from reading your spec, maybe we should take advantage of the metadefs and glance, because the other problem we've got is discoverability. We want the end users to be able to see what the volume type can do, but we want to do it in such a way. So currently what you can do is you can write a long description of your volume type and just say, this is encrypted, it does some kind of replication on the back end, and you say all that stuff there. But then that's different in every cloud. But if we took advantage of the metadefs, we could define enumerations so that, so we can define key value pairs that would be accessible in different clouds, because you'd use the metadefs API to find them.
I think Josephine is no longer here.
Oh, no.
So, she joined back. So, Ryan, start again.
Oh man, Josephine, I solved your whole problem.
I'm sorry.
No, that's
Yeah.
okay. No, so what I'm thinking, so the disadvantage to putting, we sort of don't want to duplicate information, but that might be the better way to do it. So we have a strict separation between actionable stuff for the scheduler, which would be in the real extra specs, and then information that operators would expose to end users, which would be in the metadata.
Yeah.
So the problem is the operator might have to, duplicate some things, but on the other hand, they would have to explicitly do it. So, they'd be making a conscious decision. But then the other thing is, for interoperability purposes, I think we could take advantage of the metadefs in Glance, which is just a catalog of metadata for various resources, and just define some fields. So like encryption would probably just be true, false, right? But then replication, maybe that's more than true, false. I don't know. But then that way, at least it would be in a catalog somewhere where it would be obvious what the values were. And then that way it could be standardized across clouds. And then also the user interface can get the information from the metadefs to make it easier for the operators when they're filling out the volume types, right? Because they can do a pop-up or whatever they do to show what could be populated. So I'll shut up, but I'm sort of inclined to not doing the blacklist, whitelist stuff and doing the volume type metadata instead.
Yeah, that would have been the another option I also outlined.
I'm wondering if I get it right, if I understood the problem right, it is kind of split into two. One part would be solved with Alan's work, which is metadata that it's only visible for an admin that could be made visible for normal users. That would be solved with Alan's approach. But you also want to solve another problem, which is things that we know or the human administrator knows about, but are not reflected in any way anywhere, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
you were
correct.
saying, Ceph is replicated, but nobody's saying anything about it because that's kind of hidden. So I don't know if, in my mind, it would make more sense to find a way to put that information in so that the volume driver can report it. And then using Alan's feature, it gets visible to the user. So we would only have one interface to get that information, the one we currently have. But an administrator can feed additional stuff in there because it is not only relevant to if it's information that is not part of the, how would I put it? Because this seems to be information relevant to a specific backend and not to a volume type. So
Well, I don't know. I was thinking the other way around, actually.
Well, I can tie Ceph because the volume types are not uniquely tied to a single backend, right?
Well, and I guess that's my point. What I've been hearing, and again, please, Josephine, confirm or deny my thoughts, but basically, this seems to be information that as an administrator, you want to be able to convey to your users. And it may be orthogonal or independent of the actual drivers. I'm trying to think of an example, but
if that's the case, I think I get what you're saying, which is basically, this is basically documentation that you want to be able to act upon. Because,
well, information that the admin wants to make available to the users.
Then I would think that Brian, I would be with Brian into this. Seems to be something different because in the past we said volume types, you either put a good name to it to provide information you need, or you have your own documentation explaining a specific of your volume type. What we could be saying here is that sounds good in theory, but in practice, that sucks, because your users want to see it live in just a name. You cannot make a huge name. That's unusable. So we want to improve upon it, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, Josephine.
And there's another problem which comes to, for example, Kubernetes infrastructure like upon on OpenStack, which automatically has to choose a volume type that needs the information displayed in exactly the same way every time.
Sorry, I didn't follow that one. The problem.
Yeah, if for example, with the replication, if you want to have your volumes replicated, that can be done in Ceph hidden from the users. And right now, the admin has to describe it, for example, in the name or description. And for every infrastructure, that would look different. So it would look different for Cloud A and Cloud B, and sometimes even from the same provider, because another human being made the description, typed it in. And so you have to do manual work to select the correct volume type, and you cannot automate it.
But if it's a backend, like the replication, that could be resolved by the Ceph reporting, because in this pool I have replicas greater than 1. I will report a new feature to the scaler saying that I have a storage replication, a different kind of a storage replication. We could create a new differentiation in those kind of situations. Because yes, we have Cinder replication, but we also have storage replication. So maybe we want to, if we added that feature and it got reported, maybe it could be available through the existing.
Yeah, that would be a very specific solution to that exact example. That's why I brought my both problems into this, because encryption can also be solved pretty simple. You may even just adjust some policies or some code saying, yeah, encryption type is now visible to all users. Then everything is fine, but it wouldn't solve the other problem. So we can do this one problem for one problem, or we can have a more broad way to solve it for future use cases. And that's what I wanted to achieve in here. Because right now I only have 2 problems. I could solve them in a way, but I think it's pretty hard to let the drivers collect information from the configs of Ceph, and I'm not into the other drivers, so I only work with Ceph, so I don't know what there could be reported back, and how much of work that is to just show, yeah, replication is on.
For Ceph, it would be pretty easy, because you can query your pool and see what is enabled here or stuff like that, and then it would be consistent. But it is true that if you make something like what you're describing, it makes it immediately available for our drivers, because it depends on the human to set things. And that is, I don't like it in the terms of, I prefer the other way, but it is more flexible and it's faster to get something real working. So I understand it has a lot of value to have something like that.
Don't we already report replication in the pool status for drivers?
Yeah, but that's replication in terms of Cinder replication. And this is not Cinder. So you don't have replication. That it was a very good example from Josephine. It's like you have Cinder replication, but Ceph is already replicated. Replicas 3, You already have replicated data. And some customers, all they want, or some deployments, all they want is that there is not a single point of failure in one disk. As long as you have at least 2 copies, I'm happy with it. You know what I mean? So that would achieve it if you have Ceph, even if you don't have a second location. Just within one location, a single failure in one disk will not ruin your data. And they are happy with that.
So when we are reporting capabilities, when the driver is reporting capabilities, then it reports the replication key in the volume type that we said. I might be confusing it. I thought like the backend driver queries the actual backend if that supports application and then reports that part, not the sender one, but the actual backend one. But I could be wrong.
But when you say queries the backend, you mean the sender backend?
I mean the RBD querying like about the pool, if it is replicated or not, and then reporting it to sender.
Only, if I'm not mistaken, it would only query if it has things configured properly, right? Was it? Or did we change it?
Yeah, I might be confused, but I'm unsure if the querying backend will work in this case, because the backend driver will be able to query backend RBD pool and the other status the backend status, but backend status is not visible to users in general, and it's not directly tied to volume types. I mean, around volume types will be able to be configured to assigned to a specific volume backend, but there is not really, the strict relationship between this. And what we need is to expose something in the volume type here. So I'm unsure the querying backend will be able to resolve the problem quite clearly, unless we introduce another, the reverse scheduler to find out volume type, which might be allocated that backend, and then introduce a kind of hacky update mechanism so that the information will be visible in the volume type, which is visible to users. I think the project is talking about a similar thing, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess I'm thinking this problem is kind of similar to something that's been bugging Eric ever since I've been working on Cinder about the backend capabilities reporting. We've never been able to come up with a good list of what should be reported and how it should be reported by the backends. And I think we don't want to go down that path here. So I'm thinking maybe what we do is go the metadata route, where the operator just sets the properties on the volume type that they want to expose to end users. And then maybe that way we can, we'll start to get some data on what needs to be reported and what's useful. And then we can think about maybe doing that in capabilities so that drivers could report it. Anyway, I'm gonna throw that out.
The thing, if the human operators are allowed to enter any data, I'm not sure it will really solve Josephine's problem, because they could also be adding different names.
Well, that's why we'd use the metadefs, right? So we'd have a place you would go for, so we can define for Cinder volume types what keys are allowable, or suggest it, right? They can do whatever they want, right? Well, we could possibly try to inform. Anyway, the idea is that you go to the metadefs catalog and there'd be an entry for the Cinder volume type, and it would list the allowable keys. And then for each key would have a type. And so it'd probably be an enumeration. And then that way everybody would go there. So if you wanted to add a new key, you'd propose it to the metadefs catalog, and then it could be committed. Now people can customize, well, we can't stop that, right? So people could customize it, but it would be at least possible to have like an interoperable set. of things defined in a particular place that's discoverable by the user interface and the operators. So
yeah, my concern right now was to make something consistent that the CSI plugins in OpenShift or Kubernetes would be able to be sure that there exists something, and users would not make a mistake, a typo, or anything, and that basically Josephine's problem would be really solved, and it would not go back to depend on what they write.
So in the metadefs, can we assign like fixed keys? Like if we just say encryption and then operators can only assign the true false value to it, then that would standardize the naming for those properties.
Right. What we would have to do to enforce it on our end is we'd have to make a call out to the metadefs catalog to get the enumeration or whatever, and then validate it. But that might be worth doing if we really want to enforce this. So right now, it's a lot of the stuff, like I think for Nova, so there are a lot of image properties you can put on images that are consumed by different hypervisors to do different stuff depending on how the image is set up. And I don't think that's really enforced anywhere. It's just defined. I think it's basically, if you misspell it, Nova's just not going to recognize it. And what you expect to happen isn't going to happen. And that's it. So we could start out with that route. Or you could do something where you actually, I don't know if we want to require glance be present every time Cinder is. So anyway, yeah, it's one of those, you shoot yourself in the foot, right? So if you don't, we would define the stuff in the metadefs. And then if you define it by hand at your site, then, you're risking nobody being able to recognize it. But at least there would be a place where like we'd have encryption spelled a particular way, and then, either true or false or on or off or whatever it is. And then people could just go there to see, all right, this is the way we define encryption. And then so for Kubernetes or whatever, right, they would know, we would just have to define where it's going to appear on the volume type. And then they could go to the metadefs catalog and see the list of keys and values, and then decide how they want to handle that themselves.
I like that, but I think maybe we can split it in multiple iterations. So because I know in the past we have kind of made life impossible for Josephine with changes upon changes, patches upon patches, and hell on earth. And maybe we can split it into, like you said, first we have the feature, no checks, just a document saying these are the standardized names, and then we have a feature, and then we can improve upon it with the metadefs that you mentioned, which is you can have checks, you can have a nice list, you can have like a follow-up, so that we can have something first. So if I hear what your prefer, Brian, is also having kind of separate information from the scheduler. Like this is not a scheduler related, this is user facing. And yes, we can standardize and make sure and enforce naming and whatever, but it's separated. And then
yeah,
on,
I
on
don't
the
know.
API, you collate both and you present it.
Yeah, so it puts some extra weight on the operators, but they would have, currently we expect them to document this stuff anyway. So at least this would give them a way to do it in a systematic way that could be read by Kubernetes or something that needs to consume that information. I'm just kind of leery about the mixing the two things, especially because we have volume types that can cover multiple backends, and we want to be able to, the cloudy thing is it should be kind of transparent. It's just like, you don't know where the thing's actually stored, but you do know it's encrypted and it's replicated, and that's all you need to know. So
I +1 on that approach as well, because in my mind it also follows the story of this is the operator or the administrator documenting things. It is in a way that it can be readable by machines, it can be acted upon, but it's still documentation, and it is based on the human deciding and knowing that that is true. In the way that they consider they consider it's replicated because it is in a RAID and it's replicated, and that's what they believe. And we are not in the business of telling them, oh, but the driver is not reporting that, so, or whatever. I also like that approach.
I had a question regarding the metadefs. So is it like independent of any resource? Like we can store the meta, I think it's a storage for metadata for any kind of resource, like volume snapshot, I can store anything. And we provide APIs for creating, updating, and deleting those. I'm assuming they are key value pairs. Okay.
yeah, it's kind of complex, but you define resource categories. I'll have to go review all this stuff because it got merged before I was Glance PTL. Actually, it was a long time ago, but it's yeah, it's a pretty elaborate scheme. But you define a class of resources, then you define kinds of resources, you define associations between resources. You can do a lot of stuff. I mean, we would want to do something just simple, probably basically the same kind of thing that Nova's got for there's a relationship in the metadefs catalog between Nova and Glance, although it's probably between the resources they provide. And then Nova's just got this list of possible of defined image metadata keys and then values for them. And every so often they'll update it. But it's basically like documentation. I'll give you an example. Let me find it. All right, let me put it in the Etherpad.
Sorry.
But if you scroll down, you have the image property keys and values. And this is maintained by hand, but it's basically also stored in the metadefs catalog. So you have architecture, and the type is a string, and then you've got a bunch of values defined. And so you could, at one point, Horizon did consume the metadefs so that you could do, it would present you with drop downs for various things. So you could do that. The other thing is you just look here and you use these properties and you type them in by hand. But like I said earlier, if you mistype the key, Nova's just not going to recognize it and it's not going to do what you think. And if you put a weird value in, who knows what's going to happen. But this does give you a list of things. So we could have a similar page for, volume type metadata or whatever we want to call it. And then it would start out with just two things, encryption and replication. And then away you go. But you can see a lot of stuff has been added here.
I was just thinking, since you mentioned it's a documentation thing, we don't require any association with the actual volume type, right? Like if we change properties in a volume type, then it has to be manually updated here. Okay.
Yeah, that's true. It's
But let's remember the volume type properties cannot be modified.
Yeah,
if they have a volume, so it's not like that's so common.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, we would need to document, right? This stuff can go out of sync, right? If you change your volume types and don't change the metadata you have set on them, that's going to be a problem. But
And if you want to lie to your customers, then it's on you. Because you say, yeah, it's encrypted, but it's not.
Right.
That's on you. Yep.
So I'm assuming we will need a new API for it in Cinder, or does okay.
I will adjust the spec. So everything's written up there.
Yeah, about just one thing I want to throw out there, Josephine. I didn't want to like -1 the spec. When for the RST to get generated, you need to put a line in between paragraphs or it jams everything together. So in your list of items are all jammed together when it gets so 1A, 1B. So make sure you leave a blank line between each one.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
But yeah, if you could give an example of what the volume type, the way you envision the volume type returning in JSON, that would be really helpful, just to see what it would look like.
So I think the outcome this session would be, we want to go with option, let me see. What was it? Option 2?
Yeah. New metadata endpoint and table.
I'm saying it because I think we should reflect it in the meeting notes so that if somebody brings up the conversation again during the review, we can set, it's already been discussed, don't drive me crazy.
I have mentioned that. Also, I was looking at the RBD driver code and the replication that it reports. So there is a config option replication device. And in that, we add some properties like backend ID, I think even the FSID and all the properties. And based on that, it reports it. Yeah, we don't actually.
Yeah, but that's replication, not replicas. So you may have replicas and replication. Replication is basically the feature called RBD mirroring, which is meant to be offsite, so that you have two different clusters. But within the same cluster, you can have replicas. Actually, you always do. The weird thing is not having replicas inside. So with this effort of doing metadata, you could be telling customers that the data is replicated in terms of you have replicas.
Okay, now it's clear. So one is for the failover thing, when
exactly
a target replication target, and then this one is in the same cluster for like again for cases where one disk goes out, and yeah, we can recover. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks.
Josephine, do you feel like you have the clarity you need to move forward?
Yeah, I think we're done here. Thank you all.
Excellent. Okay. We're a little over an hour in. Do you guys want to keep rolling or take a coffee break? How does everyone feel? We'll keep rolling. All right. Backup driver dependency is optional.
Yeah, that's my topic. I think this one is a kind of a simple one. Just to like to make sure that we agree with the direction. So I recently spent some time reviewing the dependency of the whole OpenStack project to find out any scale dependencies. And while reviewing, I found out that so in Cinder we have multiple dependencies for drivers, and for dependencies used by volume driver, these are not listed in the requirements.txt, but in setup.gfg and defined as an extra dependency, which will be installed additionally when a specific volume driver is used. However, I also noticed that the dependencies for backup drivers are currently listed in requirements.txt, which means that these are always installed. So, for example, if you're not using the S3 backup driver or GCS backup driver, the dependencies for these drivers like Bottles-Lee or Google API Python client are always installed, which causes a little bit, the redundant installation or bigger container image size, for example. So I have created a bug, but I think this is not a bug, but more like a design decision. So do we agree that we can move these to the extra dependencies from the mandatory dependency, or do you have any concerns about this? I think the one concern I can think of is the impact on deployment tools, because the deployment tools are now responsible to install the additional these libraries. But I think as long as we can announce this properly, I think that's not a huge concern, in my opinion. But does anyone have any big concern or any other concerns related to this change?
So is the proposal to move them to driver requirements?
Yeah, driver requirements, yes.
I think that means that stuff like Photo 3 will no longer be checked at all by the OpenStack requirements tools, right?
I guess so, but as long I will double check this later. But if I understand correctly, as long as these are listed in the extra dependencies in setup.cfg, then requirement check will check these the packages. But yeah, I will double check this point. But at least we should list these in the test requirements for the unit test. So I think the requirement check will detect any problems as long as these are listed in the test requirements. That's my expectation.
Well, Boto 3 is weird for the unit tests because we use Moto as another library that drives the unit tests for that.
Okay.
But in general, yeah.
So basically, we'd add some sections to setup.cfg, just like we have for the volume drivers, except for backup drivers.
Looking at the patch that was mentioned, I think all are in the same extras, and that was like my concern as well. Like, so looking at the setup.cfg file, it's not clear to me which one is a driver, like a volume driver, and which one is a backup driver. Like in the patch, we are mentioning data core, power max, all those drivers, and then GCS. And I'm not sure if it makes a difference, but while reading it, like I'm not sure GCS is a backup or a volume driver. I'm not sure if it makes a difference in the requirements that we install.
Well, it means when you pip install, you have to say install extras GCS. I don't think it really matters if it's a volume or backup driver. for any particular reason other than organizing things.
Okay, maybe we can add a comment there, like these are the volume drivers and these are the backup drivers in the CFG file.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't think there's a way to put a section in the extras to distinguish the two.
Yeah.
The only thing we could do is we could require you to call it like backup underscore driver name. But like Eric said, I don't know that that would matter as long as the person as long as the documentation for the driver mentions what extras you're supposed to use, then we should be okay. But I'd like, we can at least put a comment in though, to separate them out for ease in reviewing.
So I will update one of these patches. Probably the S11 is the most simple. The patches for GCS include a few cleanups for all calls, so it is a little bit complicated and will take some time until it is merged. So assuming that S3 will be the first one being merged, then I will update that with additional comments in setup CFG. Then if I can get some, and the feedback in that patch early, then that will be quite nice. The one with 902104 in line 133. I haven't yet proposed the patch for Swift backup driver, but if we can agree with the direction, then I will create the one for Swift backup driver as well.
I'm still wondering if by moving these out of requirements.txt, if we're losing anything of value from the OpenStack requirements management side.
It's funny you should ask, because they've got a patch up that proposes completely removing this kind of stuff from everything. So that would be completely ungoverned.
Well, yeah, what it means is we lose the centralized checking for making sure stuff has licenses that we are okay with. And I may have been imagining this, but I thought part of the idea with the OpenStack requirements was if there was a big security vulnerability in a library, they would update the requirements and make sure everybody ran a version that had it fixed, and that kind of stuff now kind of falls on us to make sure. Like right now we have Pi OpenSSL in driver requirements, and that, it definitely doesn't specify any particular version, it looks like, because it says 1.0.0.
Yeah. But the current requirements repository does is just updating the upper constraints, to be very honest. They add some the version condition to exclude some known bad versions, but they don't really actively update the minimum version, for example. But just maintain the upper version we have in requirements so that we don't get too aggressively the new version released in other libraries. So that is what is currently happening in the requirements as far as I see.
Well, it also forces synchronization if like Cinder and Glant Store both use some Python library and end up in a situation where you can't install both of them at the same time.
Yeah. That is true. Though we only set the upper version in requirements, so we usually don't hit the case where the two components are not pulling the conflicting version of libraries. So the conflict usually happens if you have different the range of not overlap. The different range of versions which are not overlapping each other. But unless we set the upper version, we don't really hit that situation, I guess.
Yeah, so I think it's a good way to go in general, but I just want to make sure we actually know that if there's anything we need to handle or watch out for.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I will double check the current behavior of the requirement check. But as I said earlier, I think the current expectation is at least as long as we list up these in test requirements, the requirements check should be able to detect anything wrong, though we might need to make sure that we update the version list in setup.cfg and test requirements consistently so that we check the the same version constraints. But yeah, I will double check that.
Well, the volume driver requirements aren't in test requirements though. So yeah, if we put the backup ones in test requirements, that does help with a lot of those issues, but that's not what we've done volume ones.
Okay. Yeah, I got to your point. Okay. So I will check the impact on the requirements check job, and we'll document that in the commit message in the test suite driver with my findings, so that we can understand the trade-off if there is any before we merge that patch.
But Eric, your point makes me wonder whether we should be. So Stephen put up a patch the other day to remove the driver-specific dependencies from upper constraints. But maybe we should have them in there.
I've linked the patch on the Etherpad.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. So.
Well, and that patch, I think the reason you can do that is because they're not in requirements or test requirements, right? Because if they were in test requirements, doing that would result in issues with compatibility with new versions of Python and unit test jobs failing and that kind of stuff.
Right.
Okay, so yeah, as far as I know, the similar project will list up these extra dependencies in test requirements to get the requirement check done. So we might be able to follow that approach in Cinder as well. If having things in driver requirements brings some concerns, I guess.
It's also worth looking as a data point that I think Glance Store kind of has this same issue on a much smaller scale, and they've got some similar stuff in their files to handle this. It might be worth looking to see how they do it.
Yeah, they do list extra dependencies in test requirements, as far as I know. I can share the link.
Yeah, and I guess Manila probably has the same thing also. So I'm just wondering with the from the standpoint of what you mentioned earlier, Eric, about being able to install for multiple, so for Glance, Manila, and Cinder at the same time. Maybe these things should also be in upper constraints. Yes, if they're not in upper constraints, you're just always using the most recent available.
Yeah, which gets weird when
yeah, it doesn't support Python 3.6 or 3.8 or 3.9 or something, right?
I don't know. I'm kind of lost on the requirements patch because it seems to me to be saying some of the stuff that the OpenStack requirements tooling is supposed to handle, we're just not worried about. And I don't really understand the context around that one.
Yeah, I think it's mostly the requirements jobs have gotten backed up and, due to failures. So one way to decrease the number of failures is to decrease the amount of stuff that you monitor. But yeah, I'm starting to think that would be a mistake. I'll leave another comment on that patch, and Stephen can explain why this is a good idea. But yeah, and then Takashi, I really don't know that the stuff in setup.cfg is checked by the requirements job.
Well, my hunch is that it's not.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, because the driver requirements was like a courtesy for consumers of Cinder, but it wasn't actually used by anything as far as I know. So
yeah, I recently saw some problems also messaging when some people tries to add a new the driver with additional dependencies. And if I remember correctly, that one added a package to only setup.gfg and didn't add it to requirements. So I thought that it'll be checking the setup.gfg, but yeah, I would double check that.
Yeah, as far as I know, we've been doing that sort of by hand as part of the driver reviews. If they want to add a new library, we make them go through the process of proposing it to the requirements team.
Yeah.
But I don't know that that's automatically enforced anywhere.
Okay. Yeah, I will watch that requirement patch, and yeah, also keep some the time to look into the current requirements and update the commit message, or probably join the upcoming Cinder the meetings later, so to discuss that point further.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement that you've got a good idea to separate out the backup driver dependencies. So.
Yeah, and I think the common concerns here is the requirement check, and unless anyone else will bring another concern here. Seems not. So I think I'm done about this topic. So I will follow up in that patch, as well as a few other things going on in requirements. And then, do we want to take some break, or can we move on to another topic?
I think we can keep moving, yeah.
Okay. So the second topic is a kind of more like the MISC thing, but would like to. I'm willing to get some more opinions if you have any. So I have spent, as I mentioned in my introduction, I have spent some time in deployment toolings. I have found out several the improvements the possible improvements I can think of from deployment tools perspective. There are several patches I have proposed some time ago, but these are stalled. So I would like to get some opinion about the relatively small things I would like to propose to implement and simplify deployments. And I would like to give if you have any other ideas to ease some the complexity or pain points from the deployment tools, then that will be discussing that will be in this the topic will be also nice, I think. So I will go through. I have listed up some of the patches, the topics list, the there. So I will go through these. These are kind of small, but yeah, I will go through these first. And if you have any other, the items, then please feel free to add any other things. So the first one is the backend host option we have in more backends. So currently, when Cinder volume is, as you know, when the Cinder volume is deployed in the active standby mode, then operator should be responsible to set the consistent, the backend host across multiple nodes where Cinder volume will run, because so that the volumes can be managed after failover, because each volume is associated with a specific Cinder backend host, unless you're using Cinder volume active mode, if I understand correctly. But as far as I know, currently there is no way to, define the common thing. I think even there is an option in backend defaults registered. It doesn't really work, and users or deployers always have to put backend hosts in every single backend section, so that to make sure that they use a single backend host for multiple backends among the multiple nodes where Cinder volume will run. So I have proposed a patch there. That you can find that patch. The which will actually own the backend host there. And I'm wondering if we can, I think this will be a kind of the good idea or valid improvements for deployments.
Takeshi, there is a workaround for that. So if you define the host config option in the default section, and you don't define the backend host, then that will be used by default everywhere. So in your scenario, instead of defining backend host in all the backends, you just define host at the default level, and then even if you move it from one location to another, it will be preserved. The only thing is that you have to use a different config option for Cinder volume or an additional overlay, so that doesn't affect the API, the scheduler, and backup services.
Yeah, that will be a little bit problematic. So if you were running, the dedicated containers for each services and have dedicated config files for each service, then that will work. But in the usual, the deployment without containers using packages, then you are supposed to use the single Cinder conf for the multiple services. So my main, interest is more on the Puppet deployment, which uses packages provided by Ubuntu or RDO. So I would like to get some, the option which works in that deployment architecture if possible. But yeah, I understand that will be one, the option we may have.
I think that patches, I haven't looked at the actual code, but the idea of supporting backend host as a part of the backend default seems reasonable to me. It makes sense to have this option as well.
Okay, I see your point, Takashi. I thought we already supported this. Okay.
Yeah. So seeing no other, the voices, I move on to the other, the next topic. Sorry for going through a little bit small topics, but yeah, it'll be nice to get some feedback here. So the second one is related to the internal tenant. So the internal tenant is used to, as you know, associate the volume cache, image cache volumes, for example. But currently, what Cinder provides as config option are all IDs. The project ID and tenant user ID, and these are not really predictable from deployment to perspective. So in the past, for example, in Triple, we had a documentation saying that you have to deploy Cinder without this feature first, and you should create an internal tenant manually and get the ID and update your deployment. So this is because you cannot obtain the ID of the project and user unless until you create these actually. So this will work in a few. Some of the deployment toolings, like as far as I know, the Kubernetes operator may do some tricks to make this work. But it's a little bit complicated to the other deployment tools like Puppet or even Drupal, which was already retired, because there is no, the easy way to get the ID of the created, the resources created during the deployment. So I think that it still makes sense to use more predictable thing like names and query the ID from Keystone. And I'm wondering if anyone else has seen this problem in the deployment scenario and would agree with this approach.
Takashi, do you know what other services do for this? I'm trying to think of what the downside would be of using names instead of IDs.
Downside would be that it requires the API query to Keystone. But with my current implementation, the result is cached, so the query is required only once. I think the most of the services use, for example, there are several services, several examples. For example, I think the good example is Keystone Auth option or even other options, but this provides both IDs and names, and in deployment tools, we can generally use names. The one exception I'm aware of is the Oslo limits, which is currently used in unified limits. But I'm currently working on to support name predictable, the values to query the actual IDs. So I think the using more predictable names is supported globally, and I think it will be a good option from deployment tools perspective, as long as we accept that single API query we will have in the first time we need to get these IDs somehow.
Do we need a new internal tenant section to implement all of this?
Yes, so we have to register these Keystone Auth options to, to store the Keystone and the credential or API endpoint information for Keystone. So I'm adding a new internal tenant section to list up these. Currently these internal tenant options are registered in the default section, but adding this Keystone option to default sounds like a bad idea, so I'm creating a new section. Maybe it's better to discuss on the actual patch instead of taking time during the session. Sorry about that. But yeah, it has been stalled for some time, so it would be nice if if this can be moved forward so that I can more easily implement this feature during deployment, hopefully.
Yeah, I just noticed 2021 was when you proposed this.
Yeah. And the other two listed below are kind of simple ones. So I do not discuss details. If you have any time to give some thought on this, that would be nice. Probably the third one, the motivation behind the third one is to trying to slim up the current huge default section we have. We have very many options to be registered in the default section. So I'm wondering if it makes sense to move some of the option to the dedicated section, so to make these options more friendly to operators. I can probably propose some of the other ideas additionally, but yeah, I currently have I'm currently starting with the quarter section, which was already done in a few other projects, but yeah. Anyway, I think it'll be it's good as long as I can get some feedback in these review patches. The reviews. When you get some time. And I don't have real many things I have to discuss during this meeting, I guess. So if you don't have immediate questions, then I think that's all. I'm wondering if anyone else has any, the points to, if we can improve to simplify. I think I'm trying to find, improve something, the things from deployment to perspective for easy management, hopefully. But if you have any other topics, then probably, the improving that point will still make sense to, improve the UX. But yeah, these are the all current we have, and if anyone else has any other ideas, then we can discuss this during this topic, or I can wrap up the topic and then continue the discussion in the actual reviews, I guess.
Yeah, I think we just have to focus our attention on the review.
Yeah, thanks for posting these, Takashi, because it's worth paying attention to.
It would be good to have an example somewhere what parameters need to be configured in the internal tenant.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like the image cache is part of the documentation, which discusses the need to configure the internal tenant. So maybe the patch just needs to include updates to the documentation.
Yeah, will do.
I won't put it in the Etherpad because I'm liable to damage it, but here's the documentation.
So if we're in good shape on this topic, I'll propose a 15-minute break, and then we'll start with the schema validation after the break. Are there any objections?
Yeah, it's probably better to pin Stephen to check his availability because I'm not seeing him in the attendees now.
Notice that too.
Let me ping him.
So Takashi, did you want to discuss the other parts as well? Like after the internal tenant, there is the quotas thing and
Yeah, I think these are quite simple. So as long as I can get some attention, the attention for reviews, that's enough. I think. I mean, I'm a little bit hesitant to go through every single small patches to get the agreement here because that's a kind of the review request thing. So yeah, if you can give some thought in these reviews, then that'll be good. I mean, it has been a kind of open for some time, so I was wondering if I can get some feedback. I mean, along with the other two topics I would like to propose with some priorities.
okay, I will take a look at the quotas one because there are some parameters that we will be deprecating in favor of the new quota driver. So
Yeah.
I understand the general idea. It's to have a separate config section, but the parameters might be different. So yeah,
Okay.
I will.
Yeah, so if we are duplicating some of these item parameters now, then we can probably hold on these duplication until we drop the legacy options. I mean, that will be still another option. So I mean, if we are duplicating these parameters quite soon, then it will be just redundant to duplicate move the section and then duplicate it and remove it. Then we can directly duplicate and remove it without moving these to other sections. So yeah. I mean, that's if we can think about it, the code thing later. I'm not really following, unfortunately, I'm not really following the plan for that, with the unified code stuff in Cinder. But yeah, if I can get some of clear view, then I can probably give another thought to avoid redundant update about this. But yeah, for now, it'll be nice if I can ask for your reviews about this, especially because you are already working on code stuff.
Yeah, sure, we can connect on this later. Okay. Yeah, sorry, John. I think you wanted to propose a break.
Yeah, unless there's an objection. I think we maybe need a little bit of time for Stephen to receive the ping, and I think if he's going to propose this topic, he's at least going to need a few minutes because he hasn't responded yet.
So should we resume in 15 minutes, like 3:10 UTC?
Sounds good. Back in 15.
See ya.
Okay, thanks.